Dinner and a Book is supported by the Rex and Alice A. Martin Foundation of Elkhart, celebrating the spirit of Alice Martin and her love of good food and good friends.
Author Matthew B. Crawford's 2009 nonfiction book, Shop Class as Soulcraft, An Inquiry into the Value of Work, remains a powerful reflection on what we lose when we lose connections to our material and mechanical world. I am delighted to be joined in the studio with longtime local nonprofit community leader and advocate for positive community change, Sam Centellas, to discuss the ethics and pleasures of repair as we fix dishes to nourish working bodies. Welcome, Sam.
Glad to be here, April.
Thanks for saying yes to this.
Excited to do this.
It was so interesting to read this book. How did you choose it?
So actually, my older brother, who's a professor, who's not super mechanically inclined, but learned how to work on motorcycles in college, he gifted me the book.
Okay.
I've been a longtime car guy. I love car stuff and have always been connected and involved there. And so this was a great book, and I read it, and it really spoke to me. So I've always loved that book.
As I read it, I thought about it speaking to you. So, and you've got so much experience here. So let's talk about what we're making, and then we'll dig into the book. So what is happening here?
I am working on chicken wings. And what I'm going to do that's unique with the chicken wings, one, I'm cutting them all in half, and so I've gotten a couple ready here. And I am doing South American inspired with my Bolivian roots here.
Nice.
And so I've cut a bunch in half, and I actually put them in a bowl here. And I generally I do this all kind of by eye and ear and nose. I do about a teaspoon of what is called ají amarillo. It's yellow pepper. That's local to the Andes Mountains. So it's a beautiful color. It smells fantastic. It's not super spicy. It's more tangy than spicy. But some of them can get pretty spicy. And I'm seasoning with that and a little bit of carne asada mix, also just kind of done by eye. And then a little bit of olive oil so they don't burn once I get them in the air fryer here.
Okay, awesome. So, and I'm getting started with a rustic peach galette. So one of the themes in this book is, remembering kind of lost crafts and arts, and especially remembering, maybe how our parents and grandparents knew to make the most of whatever was around them. So in that spirit, while we're filming this, there's just a peach avalanche in town right now. But a lot of them are these little tiny peaches. They've got little blemishes on them. I've talked with a lot of people who say, I don't really know what to do with these. They're perfect for cooking, and so I'm going to make this open-faced tart. It's very easy, and I'm going to show you how to make a pie crust, which of course you can buy, but I'm going to tell you anybody can do it with the right tool, which is another theme in the book, and also it's just a billion times better. That is a mathematical equation. So I'm not
going to check your math. I'm not going to check your math.
So I've cut up some peaches here. I've got a little bit of arrowroot to thicken this mixture, a little bit of sugar and cardamom and cinnamon. I'm going to put just a little bit of lemon juice in here, and then I'm going to let these peaches kind of stew in their juices while I show you how to make the crust. So, and you're further dismembering
I'm about ready to put my first batch in. So
you are already?
Yeah. So they take a little while to cook. So I've got this first batch ready. I try to get about this reasonable color. I'm going to put maybe a little more of my carne asada seasoning on it and mix that up. And then I'm going to throw them in an air fryer here.
Okay, awesome. All right. So this book, and maybe I'll just very quickly before we start talking about the book, super simple to make a pie crust in a Cuisinart, and the key is you're not touching it. So if you want a really crisp pie crust, you've got to get the fat incorporated in there without warming it up. So this is flour, salt, and a little bit of sugar. Got frozen cubes of butter here. I'm going to pulse this, and then you just, I'll be adding a little bit of vinegar and ice water just to get it to a just to get it to a malleable thing, and you don't touch it with your hands. So, so let's maybe talk about his general argument in this book, which, you know, this was written in 2009. People keep talking about it. It was recently quoted in the New York Times op-ed as people were trying to puzzle through what is motivating Gen Z, this kind of reaction against corporate office life, this re-embracing of learning how to make things, kind of those lost arts. How would you capture what it is that he's trying to teach us in this book?
I think a lot of it for me is about the value of work.
Nice.
And that's something that, you know, I learned from, you know, my grandpa, who was a mechanic, but the value of being able to take some time with your hands and touch something, fix something, being able to know how something works even at a basic level is really important. And that's, I think, part of the core and how we got away from that, and talking about trying to get back to that a little bit more.
Yeah, he's got, so, you know, true confession, I am not a mechanic. Sam is, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But there's footholds that any of us can make, I think, especially in the way he talks about how quickly most of us have lost mechanical expertise. So, for example, just one point that really stuck with me, the disappearance of the dipstick. That it's really almost impossible now to check your own oil, or the detail that in a Sears Roebuck catalog used to, when you bought a mixer or something, it always came with a repair manual, and the assumption was you've got tools at home, you know, with the right instructions you'll be able to open this up and repair it, and that is just so far from the planned obsolescence of so many electronics and things now, where
so many electronics don't even come with screws to take it apart.
Yes.
Let alone the thought that you would service it and you would take care of it.
Yeah.
And
nice
most
point.
people understanding of even just the basics of how to change your own oil.
Yes.
Not that you would need to do it yourself, but just to understand what it actually means, that they just take the oil out of the car and then they just put new oil in.
Yes.
Is basically all it is, right?
It ain't rocket science.
It's not a magical thing that's happening back there.
But if you don't understand that, you are actually not understanding something fundamental about why it matters to have oil in an engine. So he's, and you'll see here, I've just made, this is how quickly it comes together. And you want to always keep this chilled. So I've got another one out here. I'm going to put this over to the side and chill it, and I'll make my family a galette later. And then I'll show you how easy this is to roll out.
And all I'm doing over here is now turning some wings. I did them for about 7 minutes on one side, and then I'm gonna try to do them for about 7 minutes on the other side, and they'll be about ready.
All right.
Be about ready.
So the author is an academic, and he ends up sort of rejecting that life for what he finds as just a much more meaningful engagement with the material world. You know, he gets an academic job, he's bored, he reopens his motorcycle mechanic shop.
So, it spoke to me. You know, I'm an academic as well. I worked in higher education for a long time. I have an advanced degree.
We worked together.
Yeah, we worked together
so
at ISB, and I have an advanced degree. And for me, you know, when I was working at Ivy Tech, I decided to take mechanics classes.
So great.
And work in the auto shop, and it really connected me again to that work of the value of figuring out a problem.
Yes.
Of saying sometimes you've got a car up on a lift, and you and a couple classmates are looking up going, how are we gonna get this gas tank out? I don't know, but we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure it out. And then doing that process to get that done is what I think is a really valuable thing that we often don't have. And working sometimes in a theoretical world when problems don't end. You know,
yes,
it's like
very nice point.
Yeah, the problem never ends. Like, we're always going to try to figure out how to make something faster or more efficient or change a formula. And sometimes you just want to be able to lift a car up, pour the oil out, and then put it back down and pour more oil into it. And so it's an easy process.
But also, all of those things that we teach in higher ed are absolutely part of what he wants to do, is remind us that manual work is intellectual work.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That that scene, which to me was so powerful, of having a car up on a lift, you're asking for help from others. There's collaborative work. There's puzzling things through. The stakes are very high. If you don't adjust the brakes right.
Yeah, and I think it is the value, and we're seeing a resurgence of that in general now, is the value of a plumber, a value of a mechanic, a value of people who work with their hands, who I think we went through a cycle where people who did that were not valued. And I tell the story of my grandpa who didn't finish school, but opened a garage, was a business owner, but he always felt like, oh, those college kids, and he always felt like he wasn't as good.
Yeah.
And that always I think was a chip on my shoulder. Like I want to make sure that even though I'm becoming a college kid, I never look back and think like my grandpa was lesser because of what his profession was.
Yeah, in fact, the opposite. And my father was a union pipe fitter. I grew up in a home where fixing things and mending things was was what was expected. So I'll just show you, this is so fun. It's so much more fun than pie. You just kind of arrange the fruit however you like.
Fantastic.
On the flat sheet, you fold it over. It's a little bit like origami, and this is just a little bit of egg wash and so egg yolk and milk. I'm going to put a little bit of turbinado sugar on it, and then we'll put it in a 375 oven, and we are going to be so happy in a little bit. So I'm
almost done. I got a couple more minutes. Usually I do about 7 minutes per side, and then I'll turn them again and kind of see. Once again, it's you just have to go by eye a little bit and smell.
Just like in the garage.
Exactly, and give it a couple more minutes, a couple more turns, and then they'll be ready.
Okay, excellent. And we're going to take a little break and look at some images of Sam's family, his grandfather's shop, and Sam at work in the mechanic's garage. We'll be right back. Sam and I are cooking up a feast for hardworking people, and what are you going to be making here with this delicious produce?
So I'm making a fairly traditional guacamole,
Okay.
which everybody makes a little bit differently, right? So whether your kids like onions or not, or what's in there, we always know there's avocados in there. I actually like to eat mine with chicharrones because I'm low carb, and I use the chicharrones as a chip. So we're going to have fun making that.
All right, and lots of people I know are low carb. I am making high carb dishes. So I'm going to make a panzanella salad, a bread salad that I think is pretty common to most ethnic cooking, where there's always some way to use what's about to go bad in your kitchen. So a panzanella salad or a bread salad, you toast some bread that might be going stale, and you use kind of your juiciest produce that is about to kind of collapse, and it's perfect for a very juicy celebration of where we are right now, which is late summer. So, but I'm going to go ahead and pull out this galette, and we'll let that cool down here, and you can see that turbinado sugar gives it just a nice little color, and for the extra little bit of glam, it's nice to have a little bit of peach jam that you just daub on the top, and that gives it a very nice showy. We got to be showy. It's like what would the equivalent be in a garage? A final paint job,
waxing
gloss.
it at the end.
Yes,
You're waxing it at the end.
But so much more delicious.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit while you're getting your guacamole started about the kind of revaluing of other kinds of knowledge besides college. So this is one of the main themes of the book. The author has a PhD in political theory. You can tell he quotes theorists throughout the book, but he really wants to talk about the kind of the limits of what we're teaching people in college, and also, I guess, more importantly, the expectation that every single person would go to college, and that that's the only way to make a meaningful life. Well, so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think some of it's about what and how you learn things and putting value to them. So the easy example I always use for folks is that, no matter how great of a professor you are, you can't teach someone how to ride a bike in a classroom.
Yes.
So you have to get your butt on a bike and go out
Yeah.
there and try it.
Yeah.
And some of those lessons hurt.
Yeah.
And then the outcome is that you learn how to ride a bike.
Yes.
And so it's a value of how do we put a value on that type of learning and education, and then that ties back for me to the book, right, about learning
Yes.
how to fix a car.
Yeah, and revaluing that. So I'll just talk about the base. This has a vinaigrette base with very pungent garlic. I don't know if you're getting wafts
I
of
can
this,
smell it.
but
It smells
grated
good.
to really release that. A little bit of olive oil, little bit of wine vinegar and salt and pepper and Dijon, so a really nice pungent base. And then I'm going to be putting the ingredients in this bowl, and then you're going to want to let the dressing kind of marinate in everything for for about a half hour before you serve it, so that everything, it's a little bit like stuffing at Thanksgiving. You want some parts to be crispy, you want some parts to be just infused with this extremely pungent dressing.
And
So
I'm still finishing up my wings from earlier. The last
good.
batch
All
is kind
right.
of coming out, and so I think I am done there. So I'm going to move those over here and get these done.
all right.
And those turned out well. You can smell that ají
All right.
amarillo
They look
on there.
beautiful even to this vegetarian, so go figure, Sam.
I had to make sure we can all have something we like. We all have
right.
something
Oh, that's
we
great.
like.
So
And then I'm chopping up, one of the things I always do with my tomatoes is I leave them a little bit rough cut.
Oh,
because
nice.
I kind of like them in there a little bit for the flavor, but also for, the look of them when they're in there. And then my kids don't like them, so they can pick them out.
That is so funny. Yes, yeah. Thinking practically about who you're cooking for. Among the kinds of lessons that Crawford is hoping that we will pay attention to is like the real consequences of some kinds of knowledge. He describes some of the work that we kind of train people in college to do, cubicle work, where there's maybe it's a little bit like assembly line work where you don't quite know what's going to happen a little further down. And in fact, he connects that to the really interesting history of the denigration of manual labor. And if you think about what happens during industrialization, people who were really skilled craftspersons often kind of had to be retrained to work on an assembly line. And so somebody who could have maybe rebuilt a whole engine, understood that, is now being told, your job is to tighten these two bolts
Exactly,
and pass
yeah.
it along. So for lots of us who enjoy history, I found that just really interesting to contemplate the origins of the denigration of manual labor. And of course, you could connect it to the defanging of labor unions and, having grown up in a labor home myself. And he wants us to say it doesn't have to be this way. We can remember how much expertise people bring to the table and how valuable that is.
Yeah, and I wrote a blog once, when I was actually going through my program about sometimes the way different people would treat me. Walking
Yes,
into a
good.
store, if I've come from work and I'm in a blazer and I'm dressed up, versus if I came from shop class and I was in a Dickies work shirt. And I think that's part of, the critique came a little bit maybe against higher ed, but really the critique was about how the educated then look at people who are educated differently.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, nicely put. Yeah. Yeah, because he's, problem solving, collaboration, all of that is absolutely essential. And I'm just, this bread salad, just as you're using up your stale bread that's been toasted with a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper, this is a good clean out the refrigerator of anything. So I've got some peppers. You could put some zucchini in here. I've got some basil. This is what my in-laws call must go.
Yeah.
What's for dinner? Must go. Except this just makes it all extremely delicious.
And everything can have a use, right?
Everything can have a use. Yeah. And understanding that just because a peach is small and spotted, or the pepper is starting to look a little soft, that it still has a place.
Exactly.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the lessons you learned in shop class and what that was like. Humility is another real theme of the book that, he had a pretty fancy degree, you've got a graduate degree, and you decided to kind of go back to school. So
Yeah.
maybe talk about that a little bit.
And so it's one of those, it's this, you know, I think the same of it in terms of like how we dress and how we think and how we talk, about knowing, understanding different things. And so I remember my first couple days in class, I had joked that I was a college dropout, right? I had started a degree and I didn't finish it, and I went back and I finished it. And what that meant to be side by side with some students who were younger than me. I had some students who were older than me, and saying like, I don't know how to do this. And that's, I think also the value of learning to do things with your hands is that the experience doesn't always come with age. The experience comes with time doing what you've done.
Yeah, so there's a kind of radical equality in the shop. Either you know how to do something or you still need to learn it.
Absolutely.
So he's, I mean, I think we got to say that this is in no way a feminist book. But the lessons that he brings, I think, you know, for those of us who are probably never going to really touch an engine, really, I think, speak to things that lots of us really value, like the importance of repair, of not throwing something away just because it's old. I certainly grew up in a house. I'm going to add some, just a little bit of fresh herbs here and a little bit of torn mozzarella. This is a nice, get your hands dirty. Okay, it's not motor oil, but but a lot of us, you know, I used to polish the family shoes, kind of returns us to this idea that the material world is worth understanding. We talked a little bit about, I learned to drive on a manual car, but then drove an automatic for a long time, and then when I inherited my mother's 2002 Mini Cooper, I had to relearn manual transmission, and it was so interesting to pay attention to the sound of an engine again, to really feel like I was driving a car. And I'm gonna just put this super pungent dressing in here. We'll get this started just marinating a little bit, and I'll maybe keep adding just a few more things. But you can see you can right size this to however many people are gonna be at your table.
And so the same as I did earlier, it's all a little bit by eye and color and what things you like. I like cilantro, so I always have a lot of cilantro in there.
That looks so good.
The other thing is I always keep a couple of the pits in there, so it's a thing that I think most people have learned. If you haven't learned, the pits help it not turn black.
What?
It helps it keep its color. So generally when you put it away, to keep a pit in there. So I've got 2 in here now.
And now we know. Don't eat the pits though. So
yeah, don't eat the pits. And if you can eat the pits, then that's a whole nother thing.
Okay, another episode. So we're going to take a little break and show you some pictures of the author and some of the other books that he's written, and we'll be right back. Sam Centellas and I have made a feast for working people. It's got a lot of muscle in it. So talk a little bit about what you've made here.
So we made the guacamole. I seasoned it at the end here to make sure and just kind of flavored it and tested it.
What do you put in there?
Also salt, pepper. I put a carne asada seasoning, a little bit of oregano, so it makes it fun. And I'm ready to dip it with chicharrones here. And then we made the South American kind of fusion wings with the ají amarillo in there. And they smell good, so hopefully they're delicious.
They smell amazing. So, and I've made the kinds of foods that maybe we've forgotten to make that you can make with the right tools. So I'm really encouraging you to try your own pie crust made with butter. You're just never going to taste anything better. You make it with the right tools, super easy. And this rough galette is something that's common to many cultures. Great way to use up produce in season. Any time of year. Things that you might not want to eat out of your hand are always good in an open-faced galette. And similarly, a panzanella salad, a bread salad that makes use of bread that otherwise you might throw away, just as Michael Crawford talks a little bit about, Matthew Crawford talks a little bit about, you know, a throwaway culture, and we want to return to a time where we know how to fix things and make the most of things. So this also can use vegetables in season. So we've got a couple other things here. Tell us about this beer that we've got.
So I brought some Amistad Ale for you. So this is from South Bend Brew Works. It's something that when I worked at La Casa, we came up with a great way to kind of celebrate the culture in the place we worked. It's an agave sweetened cream ale that we designed, and so love that.
All right, eager to try it, and these are replicas of your
so
cars?
some Hot Wheels, right? So I'm a car person through and through, and so I like Hot Wheels, so I have a car that looks exactly like my car.
That's great.
And I actually keep it as in my glove box of my car when I'm out racing. So I have some of my tools that I take with me every time I race as a way to just make sure I got things ready if I need to fix something.
Okay, fantastic. So why would you recommend this book?
I think it's a great way to strike that balance between higher education, but also just learning to have the value of work and the things that you learn working with your hands.
Okay, that sounds great. And for all of us, I think there's a way to read this book and think back to the knowledge that our parents, our grandparents had, and to be inspired maybe by Gen Z, these younger people who are remembering the pleasures of fixing things, of making things, the satisfaction of maybe sharing a galette, homemade wings, and guacamole with people that you love. So, Sam, thanks for saying yes
Glad
to
to
this.
be here.
It was
Thanks
so
for the invite.
fun to do this with you. I recommend the book highly and hope that you cook adventurously, read widely, and we'll see you next time on Dinner and a Book. I think we should have a toast.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
Salud.
This WNIT local production has been made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Dinner and a Book is supported by the Rex and Alice A. Martin Foundation of Elkhart, celebrating the spirit of Alice Martin and her love of good food and good friends.